Hello, everybody. Welcome to Module 4. Can't believe we're already at Module 4. Just had a couple of things I wanted to talk to you about before you got started with your work this week. So this week, we're looking at a scripted reading program called UFly. And I'm going to talk about the program, and we're going to talk about language arts. And the reason I added this into the courses, we're kind of shifting from theory to practice. And as we look at this program called University of Florida Literacy Institute, UFly, they call it, just to kind of review, we've already learned about the 6 language arts. We've talked about reading, writing, speaking, listening, viewing, visualizing. And we did the overview. You guys had one module on speaking and listening. And then last week we looked at visual literacy and viewing, and how they're all connected to create a rich literacy environment. Now, I wanted to think about something like UFly because my background is I'm a reading specialist, and I want to teach the science of reading, of course. And with the science of reading, we know that we need research-based, systematic, explicit phonics programs to address foundational reading skills, to address phonemic awareness, etc. And so my question that we're going to look at this week is, how do we ensure that our students have that explicit, systematic phonics and also the language arts? Because they do not have to be exclusive. We don't have to do one or the other. We have to do both. So that's kind of my goal this week. So what is UFly? And first of all, I am not paid by UFly. I don't endorse it. I'm just showing you the program. I have used it for many years. I've used it with a Native American school that I'm working with in Arizona, and I'm also using it right now and for a tutoring program here in Polk County. I trained 7 Southeastern students, and every Monday and Wednesday we have an after-school program. I go with them, and we have about 21 kids that we use this program with, and we work with tier 3 kiddos. So that's kind of my background of it. So what is UFly? It's an explicit systematic program for foundational reading skills that focuses on phonemic awareness, phonics, decoding, encoding, so writing, and fluency. It's based on the science of reading, the simple view of reading. So a little bit more about this, and I'm kind of looking at my notes because I have some notes written down. But UFly was developed by Dr. Holly Lane and her colleagues at the University of Florida. It builds on decoding, and it ensures that students can read words so they can eventually focus on meaning making. And so when we look at UFly, a few things about it is there have been studies, and actually for one of your readings today, you're going to read one of the studies. In that study that they did with kindergarten and first graders, students gained over 1 standard deviation in early literacy compared to those kids that were not doing UFly. It is a very scripted program. It emphasizes fidelity, daily practice, and systematic instruction. So it's one of those things that's like, it's a scripted program. You need to do it with fidelity. It does promote articulatory awareness of where your mouth gestures need to be, how you need to put your tongue and mouth, those articulatory gestures for pronunciation of those phonic sounds. And it does emphasize orthographic mapping. So here are the step-by-steps that you do with UFly. There's a phonemic awareness section. There's a visual drill and an auditory drill. And the visual drill is where you show the students a phoneme, and then they have to say the sound, and then you do the opposite. You say the sound, so you might say ah, and the students would have to write the letter A on a whiteboard. There's a blending drill that you do. You always have a new concept. There's a word work where you're using manipulative letters, and then they teach irregular words, those not through memorization, but through what they call heart words, where you're going to teach kids um, the parts of the words that they can decode and the parts that they can't, those non-decodable by heart. And then there's always a connected text. So that's kind of what the program includes. And then again, for one of your readings, there's a little bit more research that gives a step-by-step for it. So how why UFly works, some of the information I have about it. It does align with a simple view of reading. Oh, I'm going to go back. Sorry. It does align with a simple view of reading, which aligns with Scarborough's reading rope, which we looked at in Module 1, right? It strengthens decoding, so we have that simple view of reading where you have that decoding and comprehension. So it's really working on that decoding part. It provides scaffolding and automatic word recognition, and it builds on the foundation for comprehension and for writing. But what is UFly? What is it not? It is not a comprehensive language arts program, nor does it say it is. It is foundational reading. It does not cover writing. Now, it does cover spelling and dictation, so the writing of some of the decoding words that they're learning, but it doesn't cover that expressive writing and oral communication. And although there is a comprehension aspect to it where they ask students to draw a picture of what the decodable text is, it doesn't get into those higher order comprehension questions. So it must be paired with other language arts instruction in order to address all of the language arts. So if we think about integrating the 6 language arts, as you think about UFly, I want you to think about the reason I wanted you to look at this program is because it does include many of the language arts. But I also wanted us to think in your assignment this week is, how can we take an explicit, systematic, scripted program, and how can we can't change it because we want to do it with fidelity so that it aligns with the research, but we can add to it. We can do accommodations. And so as we think about the language arts, as I was thinking about UFly, for reading, it aligns with reading for sure. They're doing phonics and they're doing that connected decodable text. They do some writing, they do have dictation and sentence creation. But what I want us to think about today is there anything that you could do as you're looking at UFly to increase that writing, to adapt or add on, I should say, the writing part, speaking and listening. After you look at UFly and how it's done, what could you do? Could you do partner reading, for example, to increase that fluency? Could you have kids read online, something like Flipgrid, so that they can hear themselves read and assess their rate and prosody? Viewing and representing. They do have a lot of sound walls. They have letter charts. They have pictures to show those articulation gestures. And so that has some viewing and representing in it also. So in your assignment for this week, which I'm going to go to in a minute, one of the things I want you to think about is UFly. So here we have UFly. How could it be adapted to support diverse learners? So the use of multisensory supports and repetition. It already uses multisensory supports like magnetic letters and whiteboards, and it does have repetition. So in a way, it already does have some of those supports. What about our ELL students? How can the lesson be adapted anymore to emphasize vocabulary and oral language? And then how can we connect phonics to meaning and use visuals for accessibility? I want you to think about that for diverse learners. So as we think about UFly, or really any scripted program, right? Because we're in an era where we do these scripted programs, right? If you're in Polk County, You're doing corrective reading. Many states are using UFly. There's a lot of programs that are based off of a Orton Gillingham approach to teaching reading, and they're very scripted. And we know that research shows that you do need a scripted program for reading for like that explicit phonics and phonemic awareness. But I want us to think about today in your assignment, which I'm going to get to in a minute, is how does UFly align with the 6 language arts? Which ones does it align to? Which ones doesn't? Could you supplement it to include more writing, oral communication? If you would, what would you do? And then the other thing you're going to think about is how does this fit with my philosophy of literacy instruction? And so here's some key takeaways I want you to think about this week. You're going to have to teach, and you should teach, explicit, structured reading that aligns with the science of reading. We want that. And we know that the science of reading, in order for kids to learn to read, they need that explicit, systematic instruction. But that's not going to address all aspects of reading. That's not going to address all the language arts that kids need. And that's where teachers come in, their creativity, their connection. So together you can have this, and I'm not saying balanced literacy, but I'm saying a balanced approach to teaching all of the 6 language arts, where we can have a complete literacy instruction picture. And I think some of you have already noted that. You've said, I noticed that I'm not doing as much with oral communication. I'm not doing as much with visual literacy that I need to do. So let me show you the assignment for this week, and we will go from there. So based on everything I told you, we are on week 4, and I have here, so I'm going to go to my aims. We always start with what's our goals for the week, and I want you to analyze how UFly instruction supports reading development, identify ways that UFly connects to other language arts, and explore strategies to adapt it for those diverse learners. So that's kind of our objective. And the reason I added this in is because I think sometimes we think one or the other. We have to do very explicit instruction, or we can kind of do this all of the language arts. And I think that we're creative enough to see that we can do explicit systematic phonics, and then we can add to, and to ensure that all the language arts are being taught. And actually, in your last final assignment, you're going to really be doing that as an application to everything. So for the reading, you have UFly overview that just tells the overview of the program. UFly, the link to standards, so you can go there and does a link to the standards, and then the effects of UFly is going to show you that research study about UFly. I have a video about UFly that you can watch. It is rather long. You do not have to watch a whole hour and 15 minutes unless you really want to, but I put it there so you can at least watch the beginning, so you can see the overview of the program if you're not familiar with it. Okay, this is the week I said we're not doing a reading reflection. I've exempted you. You do not have to do this. After I looked at it, I thought it was a bit repetitive, so we're not going to do that. So yay, no discussion posts this week. So you have one assignment, and it is due on Tuesday. Thinking it's going to be 2 to 3 pages long. That does not include a title page or an APA. Okay, so not a major paper, but it is a paper, and I want you to use APA. That's if you're not familiar with APA, go back to course documents at the beginning, and I actually included a template for that. So what are you going to do? After watching the video on UFly, reading the article and so forth, I want you to say, how does UFly align with the 6 language arts? I'm not saying, I shouldn't have said how. I should have said does. And if it does, what ones does it align with? And then would you supplement this lesson? Now I know, again, the creators of UFly, and when we look at research, it needs to be done with fidelity so that it will align with the research. So I would say, what can you add to? We're still going to do what UFly says, but we want to add to it. Could you supplement it? If so, how? Uh, could you adapt the lesson any or add to it? Now, again, we want to keep it with fidelity, so we want to do it the way UFly says, but we may want to add something to it. I want you to think about your ESE students, something like working memory, processing, decoding difficulties. I want you to think of your ELL students, and I want you to think of one strategy that you could use for the ESE students and the ELL students to support what they're learning in UFly. So it's kind of like this we're making this accommodation for them. It could be during the lesson, or it could be after the lesson or before the lesson. So you need one strategy per group. And then how does this connect to your evolving philosophy of instruction of language arts? You need to use APA, and you need to have an outside sources to support your views. So let's look at that rubric, and it's always good when you're teaching to share that backward design, share what you're looking for. So let's look at that rubric. And so here's our rubric. We want to have a thorough and insightful analysis of how a UFly lesson could be adapted to align with visual literacy standards, including thoughtful integration of concepts. So again, we're not changing the program. We want to do it with fidelity, but we may want to add something at the beginning or at the end, or maybe a modality that we could adapt. Provide 2 or more specific, creative, and well-justified visual strategies that enhance instruction. And I'm going to change the rubric. It doesn't have to be just visual strategies. It could just be any kind of strategy, okay? And sorry, I'll change that. So it doesn't have to be a visual strategy. It just has to be changes. And then you need to offer at least one well-researched evidence-based strategy for your ESE and ELL students. Explain how that would support learning. And then you need to have well-organized paper with APA. And so, yeah, so that's it for that. So not a really huge week this week, but that's week 4. So just to kind of also tell us about moving ahead, in week 5, we're going to be talking about writing instruction. And in week 5, just a heads up, you are going to teach one more lesson, just like you did in week 2 with the oral language. You're going to do a writing lesson with a student, okay? So if you are not teaching in a classroom, you may want to think about, are there some students that you could work with for that? And it's very similar to what we did in lesson 2, where you're going to be writing a lesson plan, videotaping it, and a reflection. And week 6, we're going to talk about spelling and grammar. How do you teach spelling and grammar? And we're going to look at that because that's a part of the language arts, right? In week 7, we're going to look at technology, and specifically AI. It's here. How do we use AI appropriately in the language arts classes? And then you are going to start on week 7 with your final project, week 8. And just a little heads up for that. So you are going to, in week 8, for your final project that's worth 200 points, you'll do part of it in week 7 and then finish it in week 8. But what you're going to do is you're going to be given a couple fictitious classes. You can choose one. And I have data for every kid in your class. You have 20 kids. I was nice to you. I only gave you 20 kids. And I have data for each child, and you're going to put those kids in structured reading groups. So you're going to put them in like 3 to 4 groups based on their reading needs. That's what you're going to do in week 7. And then in week 8, you have your groups. Then you're going to develop some centers. You're going to develop 6 centers that integrate the 6 language arts that we have learned about. And then you're going to decide what center each student should go to and why. So that's not till week 7 and 8, but just giving you a heads up. So week 5, you'll be teaching another lesson with kids and writing, and then 6 and 7 is really that uh, applying what you've learned and by analyzing data and so forth. But for this week, looking at a scripted program like UFly and thinking about how might we adapt it, or I should say, we don't want to change it, but we do want to maybe add to it to support students and to ensure that more of the language arts are being taught. So that's all for this week. If you have any questions, please reach out to me. Don't forget, I do have open office hours every Thursday at 6 o'clock. I usually stay in there till about 6:30, 6:40, and if no one shows up, I may leave. Depends on how tired I am. Yeah, if you want to come but you can't make it until like 6:45, let's email me and let me know. Okay, have a wonderful day.